Welcome to something special. Welcome to TEDx. This TEDx event is part of a global conversation that takes place every day in every corner of the world. In schools, in theaters, in workplaces, even in prisons, people gather to hear the best ideas bubbling up in their communities. More than 3,000 TEDx events are held every year in 170 countries. It's a remarkable thing. TEDx events are self-organized under a license from TED, a non-profit organization devoted to discovering and sharing powerful ideas in the form of TED Talks. It's not TED itself, but your local TEDx team of volunteers that has done all the work to put on today's event, including booking all of the speakers. It's this team's ideas, dedication, and time that have made this possible. We really hope today's program sparks an exciting conversation. This is a day for curiosity and for skepticism, for inspiration and for action. The more you enter into it, the more you will take out. And now, on with the show.
Good afternoon. And on behalf of the 2021 TEDxCU Executive Committee, welcome to our 9th annual event, Bounce. My name is Nick Kokat.
And I'm Carolina Prokopi.
And we are this year's lead organizers. We are honored that you have taken time out of your Sunday afternoon to join us, to listen, laugh, and learn with an open mind today. Also, keep in mind that your favorite talk might not be your friend's or family's favorite talk, and that's the point. This premiere is our way of showing an authentic TEDxCU experience and could not have been possible without the hard work and dedication from our team and the speakers.
One of the great things about TEDxCU is that it's organized by students at the University of Colorado Boulder. In fact, TEDxCU was founded by 2 CU students, brothers, Corey and Jamie Finney, who had a vision to bridge the gap between the university and the amazing community we're located in. So our lineup of 9 speakers tonight consists of people from the university and our community. Now, on to what you've been waiting for.
Hello, and welcome to TEDxCU 2021. My name is Grace Chanel, and I'm the Director of Programming here at TED. This year, we have Bounce, which I have 9 speakers that I've gotten to work really closely with, from stories all the way from astrophysics, all the way to being a pilot. I'm so happy to be here with you on the screen. Up first, we have Lindsay Hall. Lindsay is a female pilot, and her passions lie in bringing passion to other young female pilots. During quarantine, Lindsay interviewed many female pilots from around the world and asked them what their secret sauce was to being a female pilot. Here is Lindsay.
Thank you. Have you heard about the younger Wright sibling? You know, the Wright brothers, Wilbur and Orville Wright, who are credited with the first airplane flight? Well, there's a younger sibling who's often forgotten about, Catherine Wright. And in 1909, she became one of the first females to fly. Why? Because her brothers wanted to make the point that even young ladies could travel through the air as easily as in motor cars. Why haven't we heard this story? And why, in 2021, are there only 7% of pilots who are female? There are many theories and opinions as to what are holding women back from flying. Some speculate it's the cost to learn, but men pay the same amount. Some say it's schedules or lifestyle, but female flight attendants have similar schedules. So is it discrimination? Maybe. Or perhaps it's lack of good role models. When I was a little girl, I wanted to be a ballerina with my pink tutu, and I wanted everyone to call me Pinky. That is, until I watched a helicopter land at my school in the 2nd grade. and I was hooked. I just wanted to be up there, and nothing was going to stop me. Not even when my high school guidance counselor laughed at me when I told him I wanted to be a pilot. I went off to flight school, afraid I wasn't smart enough. I was dyslexic with numbers, and I wasn't great in math or science. But thankfully, my dreams were stronger than my fears. And as it turns out, you don't need to be a rocket scientist to be a pilot. In the US, there are 664,565 pilots. There are 52,740 pilots who are female. There are 100,000 pilots with a commercial pilot's license. That just means they get paid to fly, doing Grand Canyon tours, dropping skydivers, or towing banners. But only 7,000 pilots identify as female. That's 7%. That's crazy. Put 100 pilots in a room and count out 7. There are 25% of male pilots with an ATP license. ATP means Airline Transport Pilot. It's the highest license obtainable, and these are the pilots qualified to fly for the airlines or in business aviation. I am one of only 4.5% of female pilots with an ATP license. But the real kicker is that only 1% of these females sit in the left seat flying as captain. One day I really started to look at this problem of why there are so few female pilots. And as I thought about this problem, it occurred to me that I was just looking at it all wrong. Instead, I needed to flip it upside down and start asking what it was that made the 7% of pilots successful. I wanted to find the secret sauce, because if I could find it, then I could share that with others, specifically my 2 daughters, and I could help them be successful at achieving their dreams. So I set out to interview 50 female pilots. In the spring of 2020, when most of the world was in quarantine, I was in my basement office calling pilots I didn't know and asking some pretty personal questions. And I discovered the secret sauce. There are 3 traits that all of these pilots have in common. 1, they have confidence. 2, they face their fears. 3, they have support systems. The definition of confidence is having trust in one's ability. When I asked these pilots where they thought their confidence came from, they certainly didn't think they were born with it. But it developed throughout the years by playing sports, having experience, or even failure. As it turns out, failure is a huge motivator to build confidence on. And this blew my mind, because we are not raised to view failure as a positive thing. Fake it till you make it was also another common answer. This is CJ. She's a first officer for United Airlines. She's based in Guam, and she flies the South Pacific routes to places I can't even pronounce. But she's also flown seaplanes in the Caribbean, skydivers in Dubai, and intelligence, surveillance, and recon missions in Afghanistan and West Africa. She's pretty cool. When I asked CJ where her confidence comes from, she replied, I fake it. I am scared of most of the things I do, but I am more afraid of missing out on the next adventure. These women have had to work hard and be better than their male counterparts. They know their airplane systems 3 levels deep, and they study twice as hard to have the confidence necessary to command the aircraft. This is Katrina. She's an international captain on a Gulfstream 650. She's also the assistant chief pilot at her Fortune 500 flight department. Katrina's motto is know yourself, what you want, what you stand for, and don't be afraid to go after it. This is a perfect example of what confidence looks like. There's an underlying fear of being a female in a male-dominated industry. Why? Because we still face harassment, workplace discrimination, and wage inequality. One of the scariest moments of my career was having to tell my chief pilot I was pregnant. My husband's at work getting high fives, and I'm afraid I'm gonna get fired. There's a stigma attached that if you make it in a man's world, you better not get pregnant and quit. Time and time again during these interviews, I heard stories of the adversity that these pilots faced. Whether it was someone saying girls can't fly, or they weren't allowed to fly because they were pregnant. Sometimes it was dealing with a handsy examiner or an inappropriate flight instructor. Or the fear was more internal, like thinking they didn't have the correct brain for aviation. Or they weren't taken seriously by their peers. This is Susie. She's a 5-foot-tall Puerto Rican who flies a KC-135. But she went to the Air Force Academy to become a lawyer. And it's also where she met her now husband, who is in training to be a pilot. When Susie soloed an airplane, she knew she could spend the rest of her life flying. When she told her boyfriend this, he said, "If you become a pilot, then we're never gonna see each other." Guess what Susie told him? She said, "Well, then you better get another job." Susie's my hero. I am so glad that these women did not let fear change the course of their dreams. Because 100% of the women I interviewed were successful because they didn't quit, no matter what. Having a support system is also a major key to success, whether it's a friend, parent, commander, or roommate. But having people around you who say yes instead of no is what helped these women earn their wings. 78% of pilots said they had a mentor, and 69% of pilots said they had a father figure who played an influential role in them becoming a pilot. My favorite story is about Margaret's dad. When Margaret was 16 years old, she was dating a guy a couple years older than her. You know where this is going, right? Margaret's dad wasn't too fond of the boyfriend, so he went to the airport and got her a gift card for 20 glider flights. He thought that if she was busy with a new hobby, it would give her less time to spend with the boyfriend, and it worked. Margaret retired from Delta Airlines last year. So guys, dads, brothers, uncles, what you say and do with our daughters will matter so much to what they become. Give that nudge towards the flight line and the flight deck. Let them know you have an unwavering belief in their abilities, because apparently you were very influential in shaping futures. When faced with fear, self-doubt, or discrimination, these lady aviators kept taking off, but they didn't do it alone. They had communities, support systems, and mentors to encourage and cheer them on. Being a pilot takes a lot of hard work and tenacity. But as Amelia Earhart once said, everyone has oceans to fly if they have the heart to do it. Is it reckless? Maybe, but what do dreams know of boundaries? So how do we get our daughters to shoot for the moon? Well, if you're a pilot and someone asks you what you do for a living, don't just say you work out at the airport. Stand up tall and proudly say, "I'm a pilot." To increase the percentage from 7 to even 50% requires us to start showing our daughters these role models. But we need more role models in the spotlight. And this happens in social media and in the movies. We need a Top Gun sequel with female pilots. And we need more children's books with girls flying airplanes. Air shows are also a spectacular place to show young girls a fascinating world of aviation. And we need more women in the boardrooms and the C-suite where policies are being made. Without better paid family leave, schedule flexibility, and other support, these women who have a high amount invested in their training and careers are having to make the difficult decisions to stay home to become primary caregivers. Our systems are broken, and companies are missing out on true diversity and inclusivity with this section of employees. In 2009, I was flying a $25 million business jet. I had just finished pre-flighting, and I went inside to use a bathroom and wait on our passenger. On my way back outside, there were a group of male pilots that I had to walk around, and I heard one of them say, "Since when did they start letting females in the cockpit?" I was shocked. I didn't know what to say. I didn't say anything. About 2 hours later, halfway to Chicago, flying 8 miles above the earth, I finally thought of my reply. Since when? Since 1909, actually. That's when Catherine first flew with Wilbur, and I think she would have made an excellent pilot. She had more confidence than her brothers, always encouraging them to close the deal and to keep trying after every failed attempt. She even learned French when the trio traveled to Europe to show off their flying machine. She obviously didn't let fear stand in her way, and she had brothers who supported her. The pilots I interviewed have inspired me to share their stories. They have worked hard and fought many battles to earn their home in the skies. And I want our daughters to know that they could be pilots or anything else they dream of. But it's more than just saying, you could be whatever you want to be. We need to teach them how to walk with confidence, how to face their fears, and have people around them who support their dreams and say yes. I don't think my guidance counselor laughed at me because he thought my dreams were funny. He laughed because a young girl in a town full of cowboys and ranchers was in his office dreaming of far away horizons. He laughed because he was shocked it came out of my mouth. If your dreams don't shock people, they're not big enough.
Julie Steele is our next speaker. She is an architect and an organizer of sorts. She thinks that timeliness and value should go hand in hand when cleaning out things from our messiest drawers all the way out to our garage. Here is Julie Steele.
It is amazing to stand here on this red dot, a round symbol, a red carpet, and a global symbol of TED Talks. When TED started in 1984, stages were very informal. Sometimes speakers stood at tables or podiums and read their scripts. Over time, stages evolved to beautiful displays of technology and art, all with a red round dot. It is a universal symbol for ideas worth spreading. And whether there are hundreds of them stored all over the world, or just one, perhaps flying first class, these symbols add value to place. Our lives are full of symbols, of things that add value to place. Some are useful, others are beautiful, and over time they evolve to have meaning. Recent trends encourage us to be minimalists, to keep only those things in our lives that bring us joy, and to store everything in colorful, magazine-worthy systems. These trends are trying to help us, but they can be challenging, somewhat limiting, and stressful. We need to change how we value and organize our belongings and consider how they support our lives rather than how they define or influence it. As a systems architect, I'm trained to understand data and the value of it as it comes together to form information. Place and time are critical components to the success of a system. Think of place as where data is stored and how it's stored, and think of time as when it's retrieved. I pursued a master's in architecture because I wanted to better understand the built environment and how it's influenced by place and time. Think of a home that has living spaces, eating spaces, and sleeping spaces, or an office that has working spaces and meeting and social spaces. Rarely do we think of storage spaces. As architects, our programs usually list these main areas that we work in or that we live in. But those storage spaces are where we typically start when we think about organization. I'd like to share with you an alternative. 4 steps to understanding what we have and how we organize our belongings. And as the line blurs between home and work, and we find ourselves sharing spaces in new ways, we can apply these steps to our working environments as well. Businesses have value statements. These statements guide decisions and identify what makes them successful. Homes should as well. Homes should have value statements that guide the decisions that we make in our homes and make us successful. In order to create a value statement for your home, start by identifying what is useful, what has purpose, and what supports how you live in your home. Here's a photograph of the university. Here's the university during a snowstorm, a university snowblower, and my snowblower. It is old. It is not very pretty, but it is useful. It sits in a corner of the garage, and it swaps locations seasonally with a lawnmower. If I were to judge either one of them by aesthetics or by how often I use them, they would each fail that test. But if I judge them by usefulness, in this case safety and quality of life, they're very useful. So let's start our value statements by identifying what is useful. One way to identify what is useful in your home is to look around. Look at the sorts of things that you use on a regular basis. Another idea is to consider what would be an ideal list. For example, in a kitchen, what is the ideal combination of pots, pans, plates, and dishes for you to live? Or in a garage, what is that core set of tools you would need to support a home and perhaps an automobile? One way to test whether something is useful is to think about whether you put it on a list and went out and specifically purchased it. Next, write down what's beautiful. Think of the art and artifacts that are in your home, the things that tell your story. William Morris once said, "Have nothing in your house that you do not know to be useful or believe to be beautiful." When identifying what is beautiful in your home, look around. These are the things that are on display. Next, the elements that we need to consider. When I was doing research on this topic, I found a couple interesting statistics on clutter. According to OfferUp, nearly half the homes in America have items that they consider clutter and that they no longer use. At UCLA, researchers looked at the relationships between high density of items in the homes, and they found a link between the high density of items in the homes and high cortisol, the stress hormone. And the Center for Disease Control found that 80% of our medical expenses are related to stress. Our clutter is contributing to our stress. Yet sometimes it's hard to identify what is clutter. After all, we purchase most of the items in our home. And at one point, we did think that they were valuable decisions. It is daunting to think of going through a house, taking everything out of a particular closet or a drawer, identifying what you want to keep, what you don't want to keep, disposing those items that you don't want, and then organizing those items and returning them back to those drawers or closets. So go through your home first with your value statement. Look around at the things that you have considered both useful and beautiful. Identify the things that you want to keep and dispose of the things that you don't want to keep. Gifts are a unique situation, as somebody else decided that they hold value for us. And while they might not cost us money, they do cost us time and space. So quietly consider if those match your values. Items that are in storage are an interesting situation because we can't see them. They generally fall in 2 categories. They are either seasonal or sentimental. Those items that are used within a year are seasonal. They make sense to keep. Those items that are not used within a year are likely sentimental. And at that point, we might be saving them for somebody else. Organization begins after we've identified our values, after we've written down what is useful and what is beautiful to us in our homes. Organization is the act of storing things, and we're storing them for retrieval. Good organization is all about retrieval. It is storing items so that we can easily retrieve them to use them in our daily lives. A couple examples. Think of a kitchen. Plates, glasses, flatware ought to be conveniently located between the dishwasher or the sink and the table, so that they're in between both and easy to access. That one drawer that many of us have in our kitchen, if it is a mound of things and difficult to dig through, it's not particularly well organized. But if it has just a couple items, perhaps pen and paper, batteries, a flashlight, it's well organized because these are things that we use often. We have easy access to them. And it wouldn't make sense to store each one of those items separately throughout the home. I'm a runner. I value time on the road. And at one point, my running gear, pants, tops, socks, and hoodies, were all hung up or folded and stored in different parts of the room. It would take 10 minutes to get ready, and sometimes it was an excuse not to go. I changed my priorities. I factored in time, and I took my everyday running gear and I put it in a basket. When the basket's empty, do laundry, throw everything back in the basket. It's not particularly elegant, but it's a really valuable use of my time. Several years ago, I shared these ideas with my children. I gave them each new hangers, containers, and shelves, and asked them to write value statements for their rooms. About a week later, I checked in. One child had their clothing beautifully hung up, sorted and organized by color, by style, and by season. School supplies were sorted by course in the containers, perfectly aligned on the shelves, and everything else was very well organized in the room. The second child had a pile of clean clothing on the floor, a pile of dirty, a pile of donations, and a pile of school supplies and books and games and pretty much everything else. And those hangers and those containers, they had given to the first child. They each chose a system that worked really well for them. There are hundreds of systems out there today. When looking at the systems for your home, consider several things: the time it takes to set it up, to store, retrieve, and to maintain the system. Choose the ones that are best for you. And remember, the more complicated the system, the longer it's going to take to maintain. Beautiful items should be on display. Our enjoyment comes from viewing them, from the aesthetics, from the stories that they remind us of. Large collections can be a challenge, as sometimes they're both useful and beautiful. Consider books. Cookbooks go in the kitchen, art books go on tables, reference books can go in a bookcase or in our working spaces, and others can go in storage for future reference. What remains then are items for another time or another person. Seasonal items that are used within a year make sense to store in an attic, a basement, or a garage. Those items that are not used within the year are likely sentimental, and at that point, we're saving them for somebody else. Think of the grandparent, and perhaps there's jewelry that we're handing down from a grandparent to a child. Those items don't need quick retrieval. They can easily be stored, tucked away for future use. This is a great opportunity as well to share our value statements with friends and family and see if there's synergies between the items that they are also saving that are sentimental. We can apply these steps to our working environments as well. Though when I work with my clients, I find that the opposite approach is often more successful. Start with what's beautiful. Identify those things that bring enjoyment to you. Consider trophies for big wins, photographs with clients for a successful product launch, or mementos that are timeless. Then work backwards. Identify what is useful, what got you to these wins. Think of the materials, supplies, and resources that supported you for these big wins. At the beginning of the pandemic, I cleared my office and I brought everything home. Certain that my team might need them and I was going to be there for them. I hadn't thought about the impact to my house at the time. My team only needed about 20% of what I brought home. Had I gone through this exercise at the time, I would have brought home less. And as we are now all moving towards a seamless workplace, it's even more important to identify what is useful, where we need it, and when we need it. We need to revisit our value statements periodically as our lives change and the things that we value change as well. A year ago this week, I was closing on our family home of 40 years. I was moving all of those items up to Colorado. My mother had passed the year prior, and my father was now in assisted living. At the time, I didn't think at all about the items, just moving them back to Colorado. Dad passed Thanksgiving. These items now are all beautiful, they hold meaning, and they're insight into who my parents were. We need to change how we value and organize our belongings and consider how they support our lives rather than how they define or influence it. Let's reframe organization not as a stressful event, but as an ongoing exercise to surround ourselves with the belongings that matter. Thank you.
This event would not have been possible without the generous support from our sponsors. I would like to take this time to recognize our title sponsors, Cultural Events Board and CU Student Government, for their generous support. CEB's mission aligns so well with ours that this partnership is a perfect fit. If you have ever attended one of their events, either in person or virtually, you will know how meaningful they are. So thank you, Cultural Events Board and CU Student Government, for your generous support.
The next speaker I'd like to welcome to the stage is John Bally. John is an astrophysicist professor here at the University of Colorado Boulder. His passions lie in looking through telescopes into far-off distances, but bringing that knowledge down here onto the ground of Earth. Here is John Bally.
I'm a scientist. I do astrophysics. I study the laws of nature, how gravity creates stars and planets from interstellar gas and dust. I study the evolution of the universe, but that's not what I want to talk to you about today. I want to talk about how curiosity and science has driven a series of technological revolutions that has profoundly altered the way we live on this planet. Let me use a few examples from astronomy and physics. Our ancestors were familiar with the sky. They knew the changes of the stars with the seasons. The 5 planets you could see with the naked eye, how they moved, how the moon and sun changed their positions in the sky. When the sun moved north, if you were living in the northern hemisphere, it was time to plant. When the sun moved south in its annual motion, it was time to harvest. This was practical because it aided farming. It, in fact, was essential for survival. But the nature of the objects in the sky remained unknown until relatively recently. Bit by bit, science and curiosity led us to understand the forces of nature, her laws, her principles. Exploitation of these principles led to a series of technological revolutions. Ever since Roman times, most people thought that the Earth was the center of the universe. But then in the 1500s, Nikolai Copernicus had a better idea. He thought that the sun was at the center of our solar system, and the Earth revolved around that sun just like the other planets. A wealthy nobleman from Denmark, Tycho Brahe, built an observatory because he thought that Copernicus's ideas were heretical. He wanted to disprove them. He built an observatory to make precision measurements, as precise as could be in those days, with the naked eye, of the motions of the planets, the moon, and the sun. A young protege, Johannes Kepler, took this data, derived the laws of planetary motion, laws we still use today. These laws allowed you to predict the future positions of the planets with enough precision to predict eclipses. A few years later, Galileo Galilei used a brand new invention, the telescope, to first look at the objects in the sky. In 1610, he discovered craters on the moon, phases of the planet Venus facing the sun, dark spots on the sun, and most remarkably, 4 moons orbiting the planet Jupiter, like a miniature solar system, showing to him that Copernicus was probably right in his model. This made Galileo curious about the laws of motion here on Earth. He devised a series of experiments and discovered the laws of mechanics. A few decades later, Isaac Newton found the mathematics underlying the laws of mechanics. This started a scientific revolution that continues through today. Newton's work was published in the Principia Mathematica. This became one of the most influential books in the late 17th century. Newton's physics, Newton's view of the world revolutionized how we viewed our universe. Forces acted on objects to produce motion. Machines replaced the power of muscle. First, windmills, then water wheels, then levers and gears. Eventually, we harnessed the heat of gases, of hot gases. We invented the steam engine. The Industrial Revolution was a result, 1 to 2 centuries later. Let me move forward to the beginning of the 19th century. Since antiquity, we knew about some processes like static electricity, lightning, certain minerals having magnetic properties. But these phenomena were not explored in any detail until the beginning of the 19th century. Michael Faraday performed a series of experiments. He found that moving static electric charges produced electric currents. Electric currents produced magnetic fields. And if you moved a magnetic material, changing magnetic fields produced electric currents. A few decades later, the mathematician James Clerk Maxwell unified the laws of electricity and magnetism and derived 4 equations in 1864. A remarkable consequence of these equations was that it predicted the existence of an electromagnetic wave moving at the speed of light. Maxwell realized that light is a specific wavelength of electromagnetic waves. This understanding led to a revolution, the invention of generators, of electric motors, the electrification of our planet. A few decades later, it led to communications near the speed of light, first through wires, but then through air and through space at the speed of light, the invention of radio. A century later, television. This is what I call the electromagnetic revolution. It led to a host of electronic devices we use today. The beginning of the 20th century, attention turned from the giant orbits of planets to the microscopic world of atoms and molecules. By that time, we realized that atoms consist of very small particles called electrons orbiting a heavier nucleus made of protons and neutrons. Scientists like Max Planck, Niels Bohr, Albert Einstein were interested in how light and electromagnetic waves interacted with atoms. They discovered that instead of just being particles, electrons and in fact neutrons and protons were also waves. In 1905, Albert Einstein realized that light, which Maxwell had claimed as a wave, also acts like a particle. It depends on how you look at it. You know, you've all seen that cartoon of atoms where the electrons orbit the nucleus like a miniature solar system. That picture is wrong. If that picture were correct, Maxwell's equations predicted that atoms would collapse. The electrons would spiral into the nucleus within 1 microsecond, and you and I would not be here to talk about it. Because electrons are waves, atoms are stable. This understanding underlies our modern understanding of matter. With radio, we needed some way of amplifying electrical signals. We invented the transistor in the mid-1948 timeframe. That led to microcircuits, eventually computers. Your cell phone today is the outgrowth of the quantum mechanics revolution of the early 20th century. Our devices, the internet, could not exist without this understanding that matter consists of waves on the microscopic scales. So where's our current understanding of the universe taking us? What are the future technologies? Let's turn again to astronomy. We live in the golden age of this subject because you and I are part of the first generation to see the universe in all wavelengths of the spectrum. Up until the 1930s, everything we knew about the cosmos came to us from a narrow sliver of that spectrum, visual light. Before 1880, literally by looking at the sky, either with your naked eye or through a telescope. Then we invented photography, so we'd record our images. But with the invention of radio in the 1930s, we discovered cosmic radio waves. This is the first new window on the cosmos. In the 1960s, we gained access to space with rockets. We could, for the first time, fly above the atmosphere, which absorbs almost all the wavelengths of electromagnetic light that we can see. In the latter part of the 20th century, we launched dozens of satellites with telescopes that could see this universe throughout all the entire spectrum, from gamma rays to X-rays to ultraviolet to the infrared. And I show you behind me a picture of the sky, the winter sky, with Orion just below the middle, the Pleiades cluster in the upper right, at visual wavelengths with a long time exposure. I will then retune your eyes and your brains to a wavelength 200 times visual light to show you what the infrared sky looks like, courtesy of our satellites. The stars have disappeared to be replaced by interstellar clouds of gas and dust. If I zoom into a certain patch of sky, in this case the Eagle Nebula, here shown with a Hubble Space Telescope view at visual wavelengths, if I then retune your eyes to a wavelength 4 times longer, in the near infrared, those pillars of dust become translucent, and a myriad of stars appears in the background, which were hidden by that cosmic dust. In 1915, we opened up an entirely new type of window on the cosmos. Waves of gravity were discovered from merging black holes and neutron stars. Exactly 100 years after Einstein predicted the existence of those waves. Our generation of scientists are doing for the cosmos what the great voyages of discovery did for geography 500 years ago. Magellan and other voyagers discovered new continents, new oceans, new cultures. Our generation is discovering the universe. We are the first to see the universe in all its wavelengths. And man is changing our view of the world. Before the 1920s, most scientists would have said the universe is more or less static. But then Edwin Hubble and Vesto Slipher, Georges Lemaitre, discovered that the galaxies, those great systems of stars like our Milky Way, are moving away from each other. The universe is expanding. In the 1960s, Vera Rubin studied galaxies. She realized that there's 5 times more stuff in these galaxies than can be accounted for by ordinary matter made of atoms and molecules. This stuff does not interact with light or any form of electromagnetic radiation. Because of that, we call it dark matter. But it influences the gravitational field. It influences the way stars move, and it bends light. In this picture, you see 2 clusters of galaxies in white. In purple, you see the distribution of dark matter, which makes up 5 times as much stuff as the mass in the ordinary matter in these galaxies. Dark matter, we don't know what it is. We are developing new technologies to explore it. In the latter half of the 20th century, astronomers expected that the universe would slow down its expansion. Why? Because gravity attracts. All the mass in the cosmos should slow down that expansion. We are looking for that slowing down. By the 1990s, we were in for a rude surprise. The universe's expansion was not slowing down. It was accelerating. The galaxies are moving away ever faster. How do we know? Because telescopes are like time machines. You see, because of the finite speed of light, when you look into space, you see further back in time. When you see the sun, you don't see it the way it is now. You see it the way it was 8 minutes ago. If you're in the southern sky and you look at the nearest star, Alpha Centauri, you see it the way it was 4 years ago. And in the spring, you look to the east, you see the Andromeda Galaxy, the nearest system of stars like our Milky Way that's as large as the Milky Way. You're seeing light with your eyes that left 2 million years ago. The further you look into space, the further back in time we can see. We can see the 14 billion year evolution of the cosmos. And what we learned is in recent 5 billion years, the acceleration of the universe has been increasing as an empty space was pushing the galaxies apart. So what does this imply for our future? Why can we afford to do this research into exotic materials like dark matter, dark energy? We cannot afford not to do it. We live in the middle of a pandemic. Yet in 1 year, we developed vaccines to combat this scourge of COVID-19. This is only made possible because for over a century, thousands of researchers have invested their careers in researching biology, in understanding the molecular basis of life, the genetic code of DNA and RNA, how viruses interact with humans. That's why we could develop this vaccine so quickly. It would not have been possible without a century-long investment in science. We face climate change. We can understand it in part because we can model the Earth's atmosphere. We can also study other planets and how their climates behave. We actually can know how the emission of gases by human activity is altering our climate. We know what we have to do. The question is, do we have the will? What will the current set of cosmic mysteries lead to? Honestly, I do not know. But what I do know is that the last 500 years of human experience has told us is that the exploration of these cosmic mysteries has been the foundation of our technology, our economy, and our very way of life on this planet.
Our next speaker is Angela Hummel. Angela sees the connection between love, theology, and art, and she hopes to build a connection with people everywhere between those three. Her talk today is going to take us through a concept called art theology. It's her concept that she teaches all over. Here is Angela Hummel.
Who or what is God? Even if you don't believe in God, you have some idea associated with this word. And ideas matter. People's ideas about God have caused the most horrific acts of war and violence. People's ideas about God have also inspired the most unbelievable acts of love. The discipline I work and study in is theology. Theology is particularly interested in ideas about God. It is the study of God. However, the way theology has been done for the past 1,000 years, it has been very focused on words and become a method that is primarily discursive, argumentative, seeking to be right, to prove someone wrong, and looking for definitions. This method is often taught by instructors who are seen as holding all of the knowledge, and they then deposit this in their students. The students echo it back through essays and papers, through words. While this has done a lot of good for theology, it also has created a lot of division amongst people around ideas about God. So what if we did theology another way? What if we did theology in a way that was collaborative and sought dialogue? I think there is another way, and I call it art theology. Art theology uses the creative languages of the arts to explore ideas and questions about God in a way that creates dialogue, collaboration, connection, and expands our ideas about love. This idea first came to me when I was studying for my master's in theology in Baltimore, Maryland. One weekend, I was reading the Baltimore Sun, and there was an article about a new exhibit at the Walters Art Museum, Archimedes' Codex. They'd found a new codex of Archimedes in a prayer booklet and lifted it out. There was one line that the journalist said that struck me so intensely, I went that day to go see the exhibit. The journalist had written, "Archimedes thought in diagrams." And when I saw Archimedes' Codex, I immediately thought of Leonardo da Vinci. Both of them have words and images all intermingled on their pages. And for me, who grew up in the 80s, looking at this, I kept thinking about how I was always told to never doodle in my notebooks and to adhere to very strict outlines. And that night, I kept wondering, what would it be like to think in diagrams? A couple days later, I was in a theology class, and we were talking about sin. All those things that you do wrong, the things that cut you off from God, others, love, yourself. That day, we were focusing on the Christian concept of original sin, the sin you're born with. As I was listening to the lecture, I could feel this question emerging in me, but I couldn't find the words to wrap around it. And then I thought of Archimedes, and I started to draw. What I drew was this very simple tree. But as I drew the lines from the roots of that tree, up through the trunk into the branches and the fruit, and back down again, I found my question, and it astonished me. What if sin isn't all bad? What if we haven't been looking at it completely? We've been so focused on defining sin and judging what things are good and bad. Maybe we've missed something that's even more there in the roots. As I drew into those roots, I discovered a passion for social justice, a longing for community. And as I drew even deeper in the roots, I found underneath all of it was a desire for love. But if we don't know how to cultivate the fruit, the seeds within us, we end up with fruit that we don't want. This simple tree and drawing it and the question that it took me into not only transformed my ideas about sin, it completely transformed my ideas about God. If God does not exist, the thing that we all long for and want, the thing that drives all of us is love. If God does exist, the essence of that being is love. But either way, our ideas of love are so shallow. So I sought, through art theology, to expand my idea of love. I first turned to theologians, and there the best I could find were arguments, again, for beauty. People were arguing about how we know God through beauty, but no one was looking at how do we know and how do we know differently through creating art. Then I discovered two abstract painters, Hilma af Klint and Vasily Kandinsky. Both of them, they are considered the mother and father of abstract art, and both of them sought, through color and line, to say something new about the spiritual that hadn't been said in words. And this led them to abstraction. Now, many people, they don't understand abstract art. That's what they'll share with me, that they feel uncomfortable about it. They don't know what it's about. And I tell them, I understand. I used to feel the same way until I understood what these two abstract painters were after. And I started to realize that realistic art works on us in a way that's very similar to the way that definitions work on us in theology. Let me give you an example. Most people will look at realistic art and they think right away they know what it's about and they move on. They think it's a couple in the park, it's the Last Supper. They think that the subject is easily identifiable and they move on. An art historian will tell you there's so much more going on. They could tell you the story that was being depicted. They could tell you what the artist was doing with color and light. But most people don't stop to have that conversation. Just like in theology, a theologian will tell you that a definition does not capture the whole of what they're saying about God. But most people don't stop to have that conversation with the theologian. They hear the definition, they come to their conclusion, and they move on. Abstract painting creates dialogue. It works in a completely different direction than definitions. When people see abstract paintings, they want to hear what other people think about it. They want to share what their perceptions are. It creates dialogue, which is why it works so great in art theology. Now, art theology uses all sorts of creative languages, but today I'm going to focus on color and line because it was these two painters, Hilma af Klint and Vasily Kandinsky, who inspired this method. Kandinsky wrote a whole book called On the Spiritual in Art. But he doesn't give you quite the in into understanding his artwork the way that Hilma af Klint does. Hilma wrote volumes and volumes of notebooks that work like a lexicon to her work. She talks about how blues symbolize the feminine, yellows symbolize the masculine, different letters that she used and what they symbolized. Inspired by Hilma, I created a method where I would have workshop participants and students create their own color and line lexicons. I'd have them write out what different colors meant to them, what different lines meant to them. And then I would give them questions and ideas about God and love and invite them to respond through color and line. Now, the biggest resistance I hear to this method from theologians as well as students and workshop participants is that not everybody's an artist, to which I say, the point isn't to be a great artist. The point is to think differently. Just as we teach students in theology to write papers, not all of those students are great at writing papers. Some are, but not all. But what they all have to do is they have to learn the basic components to write an essay, to write a paper. We can teach the basic components of creative languages just as easily. So what does this look like? We could start with this question. What is your first idea about God? This might not be your idea today. This is not your idea at a big revelatory moment. This is the very first time you can remember being introduced to the idea of God. It might not even be a clear instance. It might just be a feeling or an intimation. But as best you can, try to remember it. Now give it a color. What color would you use to symbolize that first idea? Whenever I do this with workshop participants and students, we have the most incredible conversations. They paint their color, and then we end up in this terrific dialogue. I share with them that my first idea I symbolize with gray, and I always want to know why. What we don't do, though, is we don't argue about whose color is right or wrong. We end up talking about the good and the bad that those colors symbolize, all the muddy middle, and we end up with a fantastic dialogue. I share with them that I choose gray because I know that somewhere in there, this first image of an old man up in the sky with a long gray beard is there, sitting on clouds. The clouds were gray, the beard was gray, but more than that, this idea of a mystery was introduced to me. This mystery that seemed at times cold and distant, and also I was taught that this mystery loved me unconditionally. And so there was this warmth in the gray as well. The next question we could ask is, when did your idea of God first change? Did someone teach you something? Did someone take you to a place of worship? Did you hear something in the news that caused your idea of God to change? Now, how would you symbolize that with a new color and now a line? Sometimes students will go back to their first painting, that first idea of God, and they will say that the change is so significant, they will completely cover the canvas. They know that first color is there, but this new idea that they were introduced to completely overshadows it. Others will just add a simple circle in the bottom right-hand corner to say, it was significant, but it just added something to my initial idea of God. For me, I symbolize it with this brown abstract line. The gray remains, it softens a bit, but this abstract line symbolizes for me how I was introduced to the idea that love is personal through Jesus. Now, at times, the way that I was taught this, I felt I knew Jesus so well that I'd rested my head on that shoulder, that I knew the nook in that neck. And yet, if you asked me what his eyes look like, or his nose, or his smile, I couldn't tell you. In some ways, it's like I don't know him at all. Now, I tell students all the time, it's important to pay attention to what comes up as we're painting these. For me, as I painted those first two paintings, these questions began surfacing about why my ideas about God were so masculinely gendered. And then I sought new dialogue partners. I wanted to expand my ideas about God, explore those questions, and I sought other people in other faith traditions. Not to compare, not to argue, but to expand my idea of love. First, in wrestling with that idea, that question about how could God be gendered, and what do women then image in themselves if they are made in the image of God? As I wrestled with this, I turned to Judaism and the idea of Shekinah, the divine feminine. In Hebrew scriptures, what Christians call the Old Testament, there are metaphors for God that talk about God as a woman in labor, a woman giving birth, and nursing. As I reflected on this, and I wrestled with those questions that had surfaced in me, I found myself reaching for new colors and new lines. I was reaching for blues and purples and the gold, and then I found myself creating these undulating lines. And as I painted this painting, I realized that if there is truly a God, it is this being that is female, male, non-binary, fluid like water. It is a being that is beyond gender and beyond our comprehension. And we can experience and create love, all of us, regardless of bodily function, can create love that conceives, gestates, births, labors, and nourishes one another. Next, I turn to Islam, and in particular, I went to the Sufi poets, the mystics of Islam. And as I read their poetry, I kept thinking about how the adjectives I would use to describe their relationship with God, most people don't use those adjectives to talk about their ideas about God. Those adjectives are very similar to the adjectives I would use to describe the Song of Songs and Hebrew Scriptures. Those different works of poetry are passionate, they're tender, they're ecstatic, they're intimate and sensual. And as I painted this painting, I kept thinking about how love shows up in those ways in our lives in so many different ways, and yet we don't give it enough thought. We tend to only use those adjectives to talk about our sexual relationships. And yet, there are ways that it should show up in other relationships. We want more passion, we want more tenderness with one another. Next, I turn to Hinduism and the idea of Brahman. This idea of Brahman is the divine ground of being. From Brahman, their first three gods spring, and from them, all the other gods. The divine ground of being is what we all come from. It nourishes us. And as I was reflecting on this idea about God, I kept thinking about the paradox of love, how it is constant, and I captured that with the Browns, constant and fertile and unchanging, and yet it is constantly growing, constantly deepening. This paradox in love is constantly erupting with that molten gold life. My ideas of love have, through art theology, through color, line, music, sound, and texture, my idea of love has become so meaningful to me and so vast and expansive. It has become the most important idea of my life. If there is a God, it has to be this love that is mysterious, personal, intimate, constant, dynamic, creative, unchanging, fluid, male, female, binary. It is constantly expanding. I encourage you all to think about your ideas about God and love through the creative languages that you feel drawn to. And the next time someone wants to argue about their ideas about God, ask them what they've learned about love from their idea about God. And the next time you're tempted to judge someone, I invite you to reflect and look a little bit deeper. Look deeper at how that person is reaching for love or to love. And let us help one another to constantly grow in love and expand our ideas about God. Just like the universe is constantly expanding, let us seek to constantly expand our ideas about love through art theology. Thank you.
I would like to take this time to thank some of our other sponsors, the College of Media, Communication, and Information, as well as the Department of Communication. Thank you for your generous support and sponsorship, because without you, this event would not have been possible.
Our next speaker is coming to us from Seattle, Washington. Her name is Yapraktu Carmine. Most of our speakers came to the University of Colorado Boulder to give their talks, but we are lucky enough to have a visual platform through the internet that allows us to have her speak today. She is the CEO and co-founder of Game Jolt with her husband. On this platform, they give gamers a platform to work with creativity, turning old games into new games, and letting them revive themselves through fandom. Here is Yapraktu Carmine.
I am a woman. I'm an immigrant. And I'm the CEO of a gaming company. People ask me how I got into games. As a Middle Eastern immigrant woman in her 30s, I don't fit the popular stereotype of a gamer, so they're curious. But I am a gamer, and I play video games. I came to the United States from Turkey when I was 9 years old. I didn't speak a word of English, and I didn't know anyone outside of my family. Video games hold a special place in my heart because they're all I had when I had nothing. They saved me from loneliness, taught me English, geography, and how to strategize for world domination in case the opportunity ever pops up. I started playing computer games because that was the only way I could get my cooler older brother to hang out with me. We'd play Age of Empires and Diablo, not necessarily suitable for a 9-year-old, but the one perk of having my mom and grandma not speak a word of English was that they didn't understand the maturity ratings of these games. I continued to play games my entire life, but something changed when I was in my 20s. I learned about indie games. Similar to indie music, indie games are games that are created by individuals or extremely small teams. These are people like you and me. They come from all over the world using games as the medium for storytelling, sharing art and music. Indie games are inspiring. In fact, they're so inspiring that I want to help foster their creation and distribution to the world. So I co-founded GameJolt with my husband David as an open platform where anyone can add their game and build an audience by sharing their development progress with millions of gamers. As of today, 150 million people have found their way onto our bootstrapped platform in order to play, follow, and talk about these games. There are hundreds of thousands of creators from all corners of the world, ranging from young developers in their teens to studios with millions of dollars in revenue. Most founders will tell you when you're building a company, you'll come across unintended use cases. And sometimes these unintended use cases are big enough to change an entire industry. For example, the live streaming platform Twitch started as Justin TV, where we were all meant to watch a guy named Justin go about his day. But what the founders realized is that people actually wanted to watch live streams of people playing games. So they not only pivoted their company's direction, but changed an entire industry when Twitch, as we now know it, was born. Because we created GameJolt as an open platform that any game could be added to, it allowed all kinds of creators to show the world what they were working on. And some of these creators are making what are called fan games. Fan games are games that are made by fans based on pre-existing video games. They can be remakes of the original game, or use the original game as a muse to create something unique. But fandom is not a new concept. Cover bands, fanfics, fan art, reboots of film, and even parody movies like the esteemed Turkish Star Wars are all remixes of original content. And in games, fan games are becoming so common that they are revolutionizing the games industry. Fan games are not a fad. They are here to stay. And we're at the beginning of a revolution that will remake how games are created, and more importantly, who creates them and how they're distributed. The notable game Counter-Strike is my favorite example. Counter-Strike is a game created by fans in celebration of Valve Software's popular Half-Life games. Because Counter-Strike was a huge success, Valve ended up buying them. But it's important to note that Counter-Strike is not just any fan game. It's one of top 10 most played games in professional gaming and esports. So how is this even a possibility for games made by fans? It's possible because game creation tools have become accessible to the public. Tools like Unity and Unreal Engine were so expensive that only professional studios could afford to use them. Now, these tools are free. Anyone can use them. Right now, you could use one of these tools and create your own version of your favorite childhood game, just as long as you know how to code. And if you don't know how to code, there are even tools out there where you can just drag and drop to make a game. Now that you've made your very own fan game, how will people find and play your game? That's where social communities like GameJolt and distribution platforms come in. Creators can now share their fan games with the world. They can tap into the original game's audience to build a following where they'll get instant feedback while they're working on the game. Then, they can go back to their players to see what they think. This game-specific ecosystem is new, and it's changing everything. You might be saying to yourself, okay, Aproc, It's easy for fans to create games, but that doesn't mean they're revolutionizing a $200 billion games industry. I hear that, but you're wrong. Because fan games aren't just games, they're extensions of the original game. When you beat the original game and you just want more, where are you to turn to? Fan games. They extend the life and popularity of the original game. And this value they're providing is changing how studios engage with their fans. After all, advertising is exceptionally expensive. So when studios encourage their users to create fan games, they get unlimited pools of content for free. Not only that, but the creators of fan games promote their own creations, which further promotes the original game. And for us gamers, we just want to play our favorite games. And fan games give us more of what we love, while the studio is busy working on the sequel or their next big hit. So in the future, studios will not only encourage the creation of fan games, but they will need them in order to survive. And I know this sounds dramatic, but you have to remember, not that long ago, game studios, big and small, were appalled by the idea of influencers like Ninja, Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, playing their games on their channels and profiting off of it. They issued takedown requests and put their lawyers to work to get videos of the biggest influencers in the world promoting their games off of YouTube. Today, these same studios can't pay influencers enough money to create meaningful content around their games. And let's compare the value of fan games for advertising purposes. A playthrough video on YouTube is around 20 minutes long. A playable fan game is going to tie down a potential customer for what could be hours. Let me just walk you through one of many examples where fan games have built a massive community and extended the longevity of the original game. Five Nights at Freddy's is a multi-million-dollar franchise with book deals, apparel at Target, and a movie on the way. Its creator, Scott Cawthon, is a one-man show from Texas. When this game hit Game Jolt, it instantly became popular. Influencers on Twitch and YouTube increased awareness for it by creating videos of themselves playing it. And this was 6 years ago, but the hype never died down. Gamers wanted more Five Nights at Freddy's to play than it was humanly possible for Scott Cawthon to produce. So they made their own versions of the game to play. The Joy of Creation, Five Nights at Candy's, Pyro Illusion, Pop Goes, and every combination of number of nights with every place imaginable told the fans' version of the horrors that took place at the pizzeria. These fans learned professional engines like Unity and Unreal Engine to make these games. Some would even argue that a handful of these games are even better than the original. With an already built audience of gamers to launch to, these fan game developers acquired the skills and experience needed to create their own original games. What I witnessed on Game Jolt is revolutionizing the industry. Fan games have transformed consumers into creators, and for some, even into professional game developers. There are over 40,000 fan games on Game Jolt alone, celebrating the games we all love. By encouraging fans to create content and build their own audiences, studios are able to increase community growth and engagement for the original game. Every studio out there should, and eventually will, try to convert consumers to become game developers. Games as a vessel for fandom is an exciting and achievable concept. Game engines are evolving to require very little code and cash to bring your wildest ideas to life. Communities around original games welcome and encourage fan versions. Games created by fans are our future. Fan games are revolutionizing the tools used to create games, who creates our next wave of influential games, and how these games are distributed. And like I said, this is just the beginning.
Up next, we have Maggie Grout. Maggie Grout is the CEO of a non-for-profit called Thinking Huts. Thinking Huts is a non-for-profit that looks to build education through 3D printing. 3D printing, she believes, will be the source of education that will go all across the world. Here is Maggie Grout.
If I had not been adopted, my life could have turned out a whole lot differently. In that life, I'd be working grueling hours in a factory, making less than $3 a day. Maybe I wouldn't even be here. That's something I do not take for granted. Fast forward 14 years, I'm in my dad's office discussing the future of technology. I remember thinking about the need for schools around the world and asking, what if we 3D printed them? The problem the world faces is that over 290 million students are not in school. They do not have access to the same opportunities, and the need for education infrastructure still remains, especially in developing countries where the funding is not available. Many of these students will not finish school due to travel distance, overcrowding, and being pushed further into poverty. We have the technology and the resources to solve this. By leveraging 3D printing for good, we can build a brighter future. 3D printing is a piece in the puzzle to solving the global education crisis. Now you may be wondering, why 3D printed schools? Let me first begin by addressing some frequent assumptions. No, the schools are not made of plastic. Concrete is extruded layer by layer to build the walls. And rather than desktop size, our printer is architectural scale. 3D printing is the future of construction. First, it decreases construction time from months to days. Often students will walk miles to go to school, and even then, the school may be overcrowded. 3D printed schools allow us to address this need. Second, it reduces our carbon footprint. Concrete production is one of the largest polluters in the world. Our concrete mixture will emit less CO2. Lastly, it limits waste production. 3D printing can reduce waste by up to 50%. This ensures unnecessary waste creation. While a traditional school may take months or years to build, a 3D printer can build a school in a matter of days. This allows us to build more schools in less time. Imagine printing 12 schools in the time it would take to build one. Once our printer is on location, the walls are built from the ground up. Concrete is extruded layer by layer in a honeycomb process. Though the walls are hollow, 3D printed schools are structurally sound. Waste is cut in half, but wall integrity almost doubles due to modified concrete. Once the walls cure, the roof, doors, and other materials can be easily attached. Solar panels and a rainwater harvesting system can then be added to the roof. After this, the school is ready for students. I'm the founder of Thinking Huts, a nonprofit that seeks to increase access to education with innovative solutions. Our pilot will be a hybrid design of 3D printed concrete walls and locally sourced materials. Inspired by a beehive configuration, our modular design can grow to accommodate additional students. With off-grid solar panels and a vertical garden, our schools will be sustainable, even in the most remote areas. Scalable and adaptive, we can work alongside communities to teach 3D printing processes. This ensures that the concept can be replicated. From Madagascar to Pakistan, Zimbabwe to India, there's a huge potential for technology transfer. An opportunity exists for us to empower communities and catalyze innovation. By building 3D printed schools, we can ensure every student has a safe place to learn. 3D printing provides a solution that is not only faster, but lowers costs with economies of scale. We're on the brink of unlocking human potential. We have an opportunity to lift up rather than leave behind. A glance at the news will show that innovation is typically reserved for revenue-driven business. What if we championed innovation to unleash untapped potential? 3D printed schools allow us to do that. We can envision a world that places people before profit, a world that champions education and innovative solutions, a world filled with global citizens that care about one another. That's the world I hope to one day raise children in. We should equip the next generation with the skills to surpass us. Only together will we accomplish such a feat, and it begins with access to education. Education is at the root of solving many problems the world faces today, ranging from health epidemics to eradicating poverty. We must take action before it's too late. We need to create tangible solutions that encourage innovation, and we will. But we need more people like my dad to say, "I believe in you." We need to leverage 3D printing to create social impact. My greatest hope is that this new year brings about more opportunities for us to envision our world as it could be, because it all begins with a vision. Thank you.
Hi, we're now introducing the TEDxCU 2021 executive team, starting with Nick Kokat, co-lead organizer, along with myself, Carolina Percopi. Stefano Matarangas, Director of Media Production. Bruna Monzoni, Assistant Director of Marketing. Weston Shanley, Director of Marketing. Sofia Bragalia, Director of Outreach. Grace Chanel, Director of Programming. Anna Hauserman, Director of Operations. Tenzin Dorji, Director of Finance. Matt Francomeno, Director of Design. Nico Fuentes, Assistant Director of Partnerships. Gabriel Casimiro, Director of Partnerships. Jenna Bearden, Assistant Director of Outreach. Olivia Lida, Assistant Director of Programming. Thank you.
Up next, we have Dr. Melanie Peffer. Melanie is the author of a book named Biology Everywhere. And in her talk today, she is going to talk about biology everywhere in our everyday lives. She will go through scenarios with us that bring us from the kitchen all the way to our backyards. Here is Melanie.
Walking into a classroom at the start of a new semester, my first priority is to always foster community and a sense of connection with my students. To that end, I often ask what they're excited or nervous about for that semester. When I was teaching non-majors general introductory biology, my students often said things like this to me at the start of the semester. Science makes me nervous. I'm not any good at biology. Science, it's just not interesting. And it wasn't just my students either. Research suggests that non-science majors struggle to engage with biology, see the relevance to their own lives, and have little motivation to engage with science outside of the classroom. And it isn't just university students either. The general public mistrusts scientists, scientific information, and struggles to see how we go from scientific questions to science knowledge. Maybe you're looking at some of these quotes, and you feel the same way. Science makes you nervous. You don't feel like you're any good at it, or it's just not interesting to you. But what if I told you that you engage with biology everywhere, every day? That biology is all around us and more interesting, exciting, and accessible than you may think. Acknowledging biology all around us is important, not only because it enriches our lives, but because confidently engaging with biology is important for the health and welfare of society. Biology is everywhere, and there's a certain danger associated with thinking that it's not. We saw this come to the forefront with the COVID-19 pandemic. Everyone was forced to engage with biology and make biologically minded decisions, some of which were major decisions, like deciding to homeschool children, delaying starting school by a year, or changing business models. We all had to make decisions about mask wearing, what kinds of masks we would wear, what kind of activities we would pursue, how far we would venture outside of the house, if at all. And it isn't just the COVID-19 pandemic either. It's issues ranging from genetic technologies to vaccines to climate change. Biology is in every aspect of our lives. So let's take a look at some of the places where you might see biology as part of your life. Because when we begin to make these connections, it's easier to engage with the bigger issues. I have a 3-year-old son. He is the light of my life. And the nice thing about spending time with a 3-year-old is that they're not afraid to ask biology questions. One day we were at the playground, and he handed this to me. It's smooth, it's leathery. If I shake it, it makes a rattling noise. And these were laying all over the ground at the playground. I thought this was a great biology everywhere moment, so we broke it apart, and we found these inside. And I took this picture, and I put it on social media, and I asked my followers what they thought these were. Their hypotheses ranged from fecal matter, either from a moose or a rabbit, to burned nuts from the Colorado wildfires, to some kind of mummified fruit. The answer is that these are seeds, and they're found in a seed pod of a honey locust tree. And if you drive through Colorado in the winter, you can often see these seed pods hanging in the trees. So biology is everywhere, including laying on the ground at the playground. We also see biology in our kitchens, too. Do you like bacon? Do you like your bacon crispy, which is my preference, or soft and chewy, which is the way my husband likes it? Why does bacon change colors and become crispy when it's cooked to perfection? It's because bacon is made of protein, and protein folds in our bodies to do particular jobs. Think of it like making an origami boat. If you have a flat piece of paper and you put it in the water, it doesn't do anything, but fold it into a boat, and it does. It floats. When we heat proteins up, they unfold. And when they unfold, that's when we see these color and texture changes. Incidentally, unfolded protein is also easier to eat. Now, if there's bacteria on our bacon before we cook it, its proteins also unfold when we cook it, and unfolded proteins don't work, which kills the bacteria. So that's why cooking our food prevents us from getting food poisoning. So if I asked you, do you like protein biochemistry instead of, do you like bacon? How would your response have been different? When we think about protein biochemistry in the context of our kitchens, it's much more accessible and easier to understand. Okay, so there's biology at the playground and biology in our kitchens. How about biology in our own backyards? I have a bird feeder in my backyard, and it's the genesis of several interesting ecological relationships. Ecology is a subdiscipline of biology concerned with the interrelatedness among organisms. Now, there's a lot of bird species in my backyard, and they all visit my feeder. And sometimes this is a reflection of high bird biodiversity in Colorado, as well as the presence of migration routes along the Front Range of the Rocky Mountains. Some birds come to my feeder and they dig around, and they make a big mess on the ground. Other birds, like nuthatches, come in and very carefully pick up a single seed and fly away with it. Now, the squirrels, they're also very interested in my bird feeder as well, but they can't reach it. But they can get to those seeds on the ground. And so the squirrels and the birds eat the seeds, and they leave the hulls for me to clean up, or just sweep out into my backyard. And so those hulls in the backyard decompose and release nutrients into the soil, which helps my grass to grow. And if my grass is growing better, there's more habitat for insects. And if there's more habitat for insects, there's more birds coming into my backyard to eat the insects, and so on and so on. Life is all interconnected. And all it takes to see that is to look out the window. Now, biology we can see by looking out the window is all well and good. But what about the biology that we can't see very easily? Or when a working knowledge of biology can help us get through life's tough moments. One night after dinner, I was watching my son play in the backyard. And I turned to my husband and said, "It's amazing what you can do with a single cell." My husband gave a sperm cell, and I gave an egg cell, and together we made a new person. And from those original cells, he grew into the happy and energetic tiny human we see today. Having a child is a fascinating experience in biology in so many ways. Everything from the changes my body went through while pregnant, to fingers that look surprisingly like my own, but that are on my son's hands. We had an interesting adventure in immunology, blood typing, and genetics when my son was born. Human blood cells have sugars on the surface. So when you hear about somebody having type A blood, that means they have A-type sugars. Someone with B-type blood has B-type sugars, and somebody with AB blood has both. They have A and B sugars. Now, for people who have type O blood, like me, we don't have sugars on our blood cells. You can think of O like no sugars on our blood cells. Now, what happens if you get someone else's blood in your system that doesn't match your blood type? Your immune system recognizes those cells as foreign, attacks, and destroys them. Now, when I was in labor with my son, our blood mixed together. Now, I have type O blood, but my son, he has type A blood. And when I was in labor, our blood mixed together, and my immune system attacked his type A blood. Ultimate result? He was jaundiced when he was born. Jaundice occurs because of excessive bilirubin in our systems, and bilirubin is caused by blood cell breakdown. So he spent much of the first few days of his life sleeping on a billy bed to break down the excessive bilirubin. Now, this was terrifying to my husband and I as first-time parents. But knowledge is power, and my biology everywhere-oriented mind started worrying away, trying to figure out what happened, how it happened, and if it could happen again. If I have type O blood, how can I have a son who's type A? Blood typing is an example of a genetic phenomenon called codominance. And codominance means that if you have a gene variant, you express it. So somebody who has AB blood has a gene variant for A and a gene variant for B, and that's how they can be AB. Now, for somebody with type O blood like me, I have 2 gene variants for O. So my genotype is OO, and so I can only pass an O-type variant on to my son. So this means the fact that my son had a very adventuresome few days of his life, complete with lots of blood draws, was entirely my husband's fault. The only way my son could have type A blood is because he must have gotten an A-type gene variant from my husband. So if we draw up the rest of this Punnett square and make some predictions, we'll see the chances of my husband and I having another child that's jaundiced at birth from ABO incompatibility is at the minimum 50%. So having a biology everywhere mindset helped us get through a tough first few days with our son. We also find biology in the places we least expect it, like in the band room. As schools consider cutting their arts program in favor of the sciences, it's important to remember 2 things. First, that biology tells us about the powerful experience we have with the arts. And second, that intentional combination of an artistic and biological viewpoint has led to many great discoveries. Why do we like music? Why do we listen to music while we work? Why do we feel a sense of connection with those we make music with? It comes down to biological processes in our bodies. When you get chills listening to a beautiful piece of music, it's because a chemical called dopamine was released in your brain. That sense of connection we feel with those we make music with, it isn't just an emotional connection, it's a physiological connection as well. And it's thought to have been essential for human evolution. And it's not about science or the arts either. Art has been foundational to biology from the very beginning. The first biologists, the naturalists, they didn't have cameras. They had to be able to quickly and accurately draw what they were seeing, both to document their findings and communicate it to other scientists. In fact, the intentional combination of an artistic and a scientific point of view was foundational to one of the greatest discoveries in neuroscience. Santiago Ramón y Cajal was a Spanish scientist and the father of neuroscience. He came up with a neuron doctrine, or the idea that the functional unit of our brains is an individual cell called a neuron. He came up with the neuron doctrine by repeatedly drawing neural tissue. This is one of his drawings. What is so amazing to me about his work is that you can still find it included in modern neuroscience textbooks as reference material, and also touring the world in art exhibitions for their beauty. Whether it's music or our families, the critters in our backyard, or bacon, we experience biology everywhere, every day. When we see biology all around us, it's more exciting, accessible, and engaging. Why does it matter if people see biology everywhere, or forever leave memories of biology class locked in the backs of their brains, never to be thought of again? There are consequences to not engaging with biology, to thinking that it is something that exists outside of our lives rather than as an integral part of who we are. Biology is everywhere, from the simple things we engage in every day to the complex issues in society. We begin to gain confidence by looking at how biology intersects with our daily lives so that we can then turn an eye to the bigger issues. The COVID-19 pandemic forced us to engage with biology. How the illegal trade of wild animal meat or bushmeat from Africa is a major public health threat and a conservation crisis. To the reintroduction of endangered species back to their native lands, particularly species that are apex predators like the gray wolves, back into lands that are now inhabited by humans. Questions about genetic technology, such as the patentability of genes, a question that raised eyes when posed to the United States Supreme Court in 2012, to what biological research can tell us about the realities of climate change, and why seemingly simple consumer decisions, like deciding to reuse everything from diapers to straws to grocery bags, matter as part of an ecological system. Engaging with biology isn't just about knowing these things. It's about the health and welfare of society. When we see biology everywhere, we engage. And when we engage, we realize that we are smart enough to understand that it is interesting. That engaging with biology is about knowing every little thing, but being okay with engaging with it as it intersects with our own lives. Biology is everywhere, and yes, you too can engage with it. You did just now by listening to my talk. So, where will you experience biology next? Thank you.
Up next, we have Arthur Biggs. Arthur is a window cleaner here in the Denver area. He has seen beautiful homes all over and looks to bring wisdom to people who have not been able to see what he has seen. For Wisdom for All, here is Arthur Biggs.
Stare out the window. I want you to stare out the window. I want you to enjoy the meditation that is window gazing. It is better than whatever's on your phone, on your screen, on the cover and pages of a magazine. I've been cleaning windows for some of Denver's most eccentric and wonderful people for 25 years. I've seen amazing art, lovely gardens, breathtaking mountain views. Sometimes I fail to recognize the beauty right before me because I'm so wrapped up in my problems and my tasks. Window gazing is a meditation. Meditations require intention, practice. I need to stop, take a deep breath, stare out a window. Some people are natural window gazers. I knew a couple who was downsizing. Dorothy bought the next house without showing it to her husband. When he arrived at the house, he went out back, saw the enormous windows and the deck overlooking a marsh. He just thanked her. He was a noted ornithologist. This was the perfect place for bird watching. Paradise. Stare out a window, be in two worlds at once. Watch a blizzard for the comfort and safety of your living room. Watch a skunk or a raccoon ramble through your yard. A window and patience makes a fine little zoo. A window at dawn will have a new presentation at noon. At midnight, the moonlight will create a whole new scene. Enjoy the changes. Notice them. Stare out a window. A window is a perfect place for an altar. The curated keepsakes. Photographs are framed by the window. Focus attention on what is essential. I've seen many altars to family members who have passed on, and they're always moving and poignant. Once, while moving a picture of a father and son camping trip, I realized that the father had died young, and the significance of this brought tears to my eyes. If you need to cry, a window will comfort you as you release your sadness. Being a window cleaner means that you will feel physical pain. Scuffed knuckles, sore muscles, black widow bite. That's okay, that's just part of the human experience. The pain we should avoid is the pain of neglect. If you have a bicycle, ride it. If you have a window, clean it. Your kitchen window is probably ready for you. Clean and be happy. While I was on vacation, I could not relax. The windows of the condo were filthy. Now, if I were truly enlightened, I would realize that the dirt on the windows was just part of the universe and beautiful in its own way. But I'm a neat freak. So I ran downstairs, popped the windshield wiper off of the car, ran back upstairs, grabbed the sponge, cleaned the windows. So worth it. I was able to relax and enjoy the view. To stare out a window is to appreciate civilization. Windows are the culmination of science, architecture, manufacturing. Windows are indicative of honesty, trust, literal transparency. Windows also show the fragile nature of our society. The broken windows theory of 1982 held that as broken windows are ignored, crime is invited to a neighborhood. This is true. However, this theory was used to justify egregious wrongs, like New York City's stop and frisk policy. Humiliating, insulting, robbing citizens of their rights never fixed a window. We need to value justice and beauty if we're to have tranquility. We need hospitals, museums, gymnasiums, libraries. We need cafes, ice cream parlors. We need places to gather and windows to gaze through. We may be civilized, but our DNA is from wild animals. Like our cats and dogs, we can nurture our curiosity, press our noses to the glass, see the events, creatures in our world. We're lucky to see 100 years on this earth. That is 400 seasons. Enjoy them, watch them. Stare out a window. Look at the way the moonlight fills the street. Look at the way the birds huddle together under the boughs of a pine tree, huddled for warmth on a cold day. Watch the kids ride their bikes up and down the street. Watch the dog walkers as they follow their dogs, bags ready to deploy. Stare out a window and think nothing. Let your mind be silent. Let it hush. Let your eyes glaze over as you stare into the eternity you will one day join when your body can no longer sustain you. Stare out a window. Just after sunset, look at the beautiful blues of the sky as the day turns into night. Take care of yourself. Take care of your world. Stare out a window.
Getting your ideas online is easy with domain names, websites, and hostings from Name.com. Name.com is a Denver-based domain name registrar, and it's a proud TEDxCU sponsor. Students who like domains simply go to name.com/perks to learn more about our free offerings. Thank you.
Last, but surely not least, is Nina Williams. Nina is a student here at the University of Colorado Boulder, but she is also a professional rock climber. She specializes in falling and feeling the fear of falling. Her talk today will take you through roller coasters of big mountains all the way down to a dorm room. Here is Nina Williams.
I stared straight ahead, refusing to look up at a wall that loomed above me. Something gripped my stomach like a block of concrete. My hands were sweating, and I could hear my heartbeat ringing in my ears. My body was frozen. I couldn't go on any longer. And it's not that I couldn't physically go on, but mentally, I flat out refused. But I hadn't quite admitted that to myself yet. The thought of losing all of this progress just didn't quite appeal to me. And yet I was stuck in this moment, too scared to go on, but too scared to let go. I was facing this inevitable fall. Now, this might sound a little strange coming from someone who spends a lot of time in the vertical world. As a professional rock climber, I've often found myself roped into walls that are thousands of feet high in places like Yosemite, California, or the Andean Mountains in Peru. I've also been unroped on climbs up to 50 feet high in places like Bishop, California, but also Australia, South Africa, and Brazil. In each one of these places, for each one of these climbs, the goal is always the same, just get to the top. And in climbing across the board, the goal is to get to the top. But there is a slight difference between climbing a wall and climbing, say, a big mountain like Everest. If you're gunning for Everest, you want to try and choose the easiest way possible because no matter which way you choose, it's going to be a long, hard slog. But when you're climbing a wall, climbers tend to choose the hardest way on purpose, even though there's almost certainly an easier way up the back. People are always coming up to us and saying, you know, there's stairs around the corner, right? You can just walk to the top. But despite this, climbers choose the hardest way because, to some degree, we seek out that failure. We know we're going to fall, we expect it, and we know that it's going to be scary, which makes sense, right? A fear of falling is a natural human instinct. But it's also a skill that can be trained and practiced. If you just take a few small falls at first, go into some bigger ones, and learn that when you fall, you'll be okay. But despite knowing this, most climbers, do not practice falling. We're so focused on the top, and since climbing is part of the deal anyways, we'd rather concentrate on the positive of moving upwards versus the negative of falling backwards. We figure we'll just deal with the fall as it happens. But now visualize with me for a second. Close your eyes and imagine you're holding on to something really tight. You've worked hard to get there, but your body is getting tired and you feel yourself weighed down. And there's a growing anxiety in your chest because you know that fall is coming. And because you know the fall is coming, a fear bubbles up that makes you hold on even tighter. That fear keeps you there for a little bit longer, but it's not enough to keep you going. And when this happens to climbers on the wall, we have strategies to manage this fear. We take a deep breath, relax our body, lower our heart rates, and reconnect our mind to ourselves, and regain enough strength to keep going. But these strategies don't work every single time, and at some point we're going to have to take the fall. And in climbing, and really life in general, there's this idea that progress is linear, and that in order to be successful, you have to keep going up and you have to make it to the top. And when you fall, you fail. So what happens when you're scared of that failure and you avoid it at all costs? I found myself thinking about all of this, a little subconsciously maybe, as I stared at my own wall, the one that was so big I couldn't bring myself to look up at it. All I could do was look straight ahead at the features in front of me, the dimples of concrete painted over in white. This big, scary wall was my dorm room at the University of Rhode Island. It was spring of 2010, and I was halfway through freshman year, facing a round of midterms I had not studied for. Notes and textbooks piled up behind me, the stairs I could conceivably use to just walk on out of this situation. But I chose the harder way, and I kept staring at this wall, beating myself up, thinking about what I should be doing in that moment. I should be studying. I should be pushing through. I should be sticking out this whole college thing because that's what you're supposed to do, right? But something didn't feel right to me. I had hit this wall, figuratively and literally, where I could not go on any longer. But dropping out of school was the failure and the fall that I didn't want to face. Now, over the course of my climbing career, I've stood on top of hundreds of climbs and experienced hundreds of successes. And for each one of those successes, I've taken 1,000 falls and 1,000 failures. At this point, I've learned that after I let go and as I'm falling, I position my body in midair so that when I land, I can minimize the force of impact. I also know that even though I'll land farther from where I started, it's better than staying in one place and wasting energy. The minute you let go, even though you're moving backwards, at least you're moving towards another chance to try again. So when I let go of school in 2010, I was scared. I had been holding on to something so tight, something that I wasn't fully committed to. But the minute that I did let go, I positioned my body, I positioned myself in the general direction of something that gave me purpose and made me happy. I tried something different for a while. I went climbing for years and faced the very real fear of falling again and again. And after a while, I returned to school to face that same exact fear in a slightly different context and from a different perspective. Now, this spring of 2021, I will graduate from the University of Colorado here in Boulder. For me, going back to school was not a failure redeemed, but just an opportunity revisited. I wanted to take the lessons I had learned from climbing and apply them in a totally new environment. But you don't need 20 years of climbing experience to figure out how to fall. Everyone has the ability to let go and try again. It might feel a little uncomfortable at first, which is fine. Now is the perfect time to practice. So I challenge you to think of something you've been holding on to, something that's weighing you down, maybe a decision that gives you a little bit of anxiety in your chest when you think about it. I ask you to take a deep breath, relax your body, and imagine what it might be like to let go and take that fall, to jump into it even. Trust yourself to move in whatever direction that may be, because wherever you land, you can always look up and try again.
Thank you so much for tuning in to TEDxCU 2021 Bounce. We hope you enjoyed hearing from our speakers and learned something from our ideas worth spreading.
Have a wonderful rest of your day.